Are you struggling to create an intentional headspace, unable to connect deeper with yourself? Come, and together let's address the elephant in the room. I'm your host, Sinead Roche, and this is the Uncomfortable Podcast. Today is going to be a bit of a serious and sensitive topic in the sense that I'll be talking about current events and going a bit more in detail with my experience with school shootings. And it's for that reason I want to kind of give a quick forewarning before I really get into this episode, because it might be a bit more confrontational towards certain emotions that you may have been avoiding. And that's exactly what we're here to talk about today. But in the same sense, I also want to give everyone the opportunity not to be just completely blindsided. And therefore, warning is advised as you move forward. But I hope that I'm able to guide this conversation in a way that even if you maybe get triggered or do feel some type of emotion, that I'm able to help you to sit through the discomfort of it and hopefully hold space for it and lead to, yes, further progression or just further regulation, hopefully. And so with that said, let's get into today's episode, which is all about desensitization towards current events, specifically focusing on the fact that we're seeing it constantly in our social media. And specifically, there's a lot of tragedies going on, but a few that I would like to really point out. Genocides in Palestine, in Congo, femicide in Sudan, ICE raids, school shootings, gender-based violence in South Africa, Epstein files being released, bombs dropping in the Middle East being funded by the US and Israel, wars, political threats across continents, and more tragic events. It's very clear to see that the world is hurting in many ways, in many places, and this is not to say that what we're seeing now is new. I think it's just that we're seeing it all right now visually. It's something that's a bit different, and that's because we're living in the digital age that allows us to witness it all. And while we might be able to help through donations, through reposts, through putting it on our stories, through efforts to keep this discussion present and alive, I think as a result of how we're experiencing seeing and gathering all this information, which I think a lot of people, maybe my generation, are experiencing this and getting the information from social media, I believe we have become desensitized. We scroll from a meme to a fundraiser to visually seeing people being bombed and hearing the stories, and then we go back to a meme. And there's a lot of emotions within just seeing that, and that can happen within seconds. That, for me particularly, I see a lot of memes and then I'll see all of a sudden, please help my family. This is happening a lot. And what do we do with all this though? Because it's so much information. It's so many emotions that are maybe happening at the same time. And I think quite often a lot of us, myself in particular, I go sometimes to Instagram just to doom scroll sometimes because I kind of want to get away from what I went through today. Not that it was tragic or anything like this, but just to kind of relax at the end of the day. And you'll be hoping to see something funny, and it will start with memes, and then all of a sudden you'll start, reading what's going on with the Epstein files, for example. I had an entire good month of really just that being present, and especially in my algorithm. And I think it's just a lot. It's a lot. And because we're getting so much information all at the same time, I don't think we're processing anything anymore. I don't think we're processing sometimes the fact that it's happening, and maybe we are, but we're so numb to it. And it's we have to push through our lives somehow. Well, if it's not directly impacting us, then how are we supposed to? Or what do we need to do, And we're also not processing our emotions to this. And I think that's a really dangerous space to be in. And I think as global citizens, or at least what my perspective on global citizens is, that we still need to remain mindful and remain with the ability to empathize with others, even across the world, even through screens. And I think because we're seeing this all so often and we're not sitting with it and we're just moving on to the next post, we normalize not only what we see in our screens, but everything that's going on. And I understand that as a coping mechanism, but I think that's something we definitely need to dive into. And so I wanted to talk about what's going on in terms of desensitization. But before I do that, because I want to very, really clearly preface that I was born with geographical luck. I was born in Germany. I grew up in the US, and although it's not to say that there aren't other tragedies happening, I was never really directly in contact. I grew up in Connecticut and in California, and I came from a 2-parent household. And I just want to preface that so that when I speak today, I speak from a place of privilege. I'm very well aware of that. And so it is not I have no right to tell anyone who's gone through anything in terms of these tragedies or in any tragedy really, even if I've experienced one similar, I have no right to tell you what to do, how to feel about something, or how to process. I'm just here to open a discussion and hopefully bring this to light. It's not to say that this, desensitization at all hasn't been talked about recently a lot. I just would also like to bring it to my podcast as well. And so, yeah, I think it's an important topic to talk about, especially with everything that's going on right now. And I would just like to hold space for that type of conversation, or at least attempt to. So that said, let's begin. And I'm about to start talking about school shootings. So once again, if this is a sensitive topic for you, then maybe right now is not the time to be listening to uncomfortable podcasts. But anyways, as I mentioned, I grew up in a place of privilege and in the US, and to that similar effect, we have a lot of school shootings. I think everyone knows we have a lot of school shootings. And when I was in 3rd grade I don't know statistically if it was one of the biggest school shootings, but I know it was really monumental, or at least how I experienced it. It was something no one's ever experienced, and I think it was really the turning point. I remember conversations, it was in 2012, it was in Newtown at the Sandy Hook Elementary School, and I believe people were saying at that point that if nothing changes after this, then nothing will ever change. And I was in 3rd grade at the time, and I remember clearly them kind of talking to us about what had happened. And I was at a different school. And at the same year, my violin teacher got shot. And I remember them explaining that to us as well. They were sitting us down, you're in 3rd grade and someone's telling you about what's going on. And after these events, what ended up happening, we already had school shooting drills basically. And this episode might be a bit hard for me to film, and I might break up with the speech, but basically when all those events happened, we continuously had a bunch of school shooting drills many times during the week, multiple ones. It gets to the point where we didn't really understand what was going on. And mind you, I was in 3rd grade, so I clearly remember there was this one time that, again, I didn't really understand what was going on. For me, we did it so often that it became a joke to a degree. And I think that's really normal that people tend to cope with humor. And at the time, I was in 3rd grade, so I think the expectations in terms of situational awareness are kind of low for a 3rd grader. And I remember there was one time I was in a school shooting drill and I started making jokes and I made people laugh during it. I had never seen my teacher. He was one of my favorite teachers. I'd never seen him so pissed. And I remember for the next week, I had to stay in and write an apology to the class. And at that point, I still didn't really understand, like how heavy this topic was or why it was so necessary for me to stay in, why what I had done was messed up, or like why that in the future could be really bad. But again, I was in 3rd grade, and as a 3rd grader, you don't really understand what's going on. And moving away from this example, but as I continued throughout school in the US, it got to the point that we heard about so many school shootings, like you don't really think about it again. It's like, oh, okay, this school got shot up. Next one's gonna happen soon anyways. And unless you're really directly targeted or like you were directly in one, it just sounds like statistics. And I guess even after having heard also stories from friends, because I heard so many at some point, it just became so normal. And it got to the point where it gets so normal and you're so used to something that you don't even realize that it's weird. And I remember and this is really fucked up. So when I say this, I say this because I want you to understand how fucked up it is and how normal it is. When we were graduating my senior year, I remember like a few of us, we were like sitting and waiting to get called up basically. And someone joked and said that we made it. And we're like, what do you mean we made it? They're like, the chances of us surviving are higher now because we're out of school. And I'm like, that's so fucked up to think. And I mean, honestly, it's not even true because the school shootings, the uni shootings, church shootings just in general in the US, it just keeps increasing. But I just tell you this example to say that we've coped a lot with humor. We've coped a lot with humor in terms of trying to normalize the situation. Because I mean, at some point, you really just have to get through the day. You cannot just think constantly that someone is going to go and shoot you up. And again, I say all this because I want you to understand that this is really normal in my mind. And there's only been really 2 instances where I was kind of, and right now as well, where I'm confronted by the fact that this is not a normal thing to happen, or should not be happening at least. And the first time was when my mom made me go take a self-defense class with her and like learn how to disarm someone with a gun. I think I also wasn't in high school at that time. I was maybe like 8th grade or something. I was young, I remember that. And I'm like, why am I learning how to do this? And my mom's like telling me the realities, of what can potentially happen. It wasn't just learning how to disarm someone with a gun, but learning how to disarm someone in general. And that was like the first time I was like, oh, is this not normal? Does this not occur for everyone? And the other time where I had to address the fact that this is not an experience that everyone lives is it's always when I'm talking to non-Americans. I mean, obviously, like you have different experiences. And so like when I came to my bachelor's university and we were sitting down, like you're sharing your lived experiences and stuff. And people obviously ask you questions about like, does this actually happen? And I'm like, yeah, school shootings happen. What do you mean, And when you're talking to people and sharing it, like everyone starts to look at you and it's just like, I remember that. And I was like, oh, is this, this is not normal. And from those experiences alone, and just with this example in mind, I understand how easy it is to cope like with humor about like these tragic events and to normalize things that shouldn't be normalized. And I think it's a really interesting phenomenon, but it's something that we definitely need to address and yes, coping with it is kind of difficult, because if you can tell right now, if you're visually seeing this, I'm like, I won't even lie to you, I'm a bit ashamed that I kind of normalized it in my mind. I mean, what are you gonna do else? But even I'm processing it again right now. I'm kind of like uncomfortable about the fact that I have to like process the fact that I've normalized it. And in that sense, I can definitely tell you I'm desensitized towards those experiences, towards hearing about school shootings genuinely. And that's something I need to work on, because it's not a normal thing. It's not a normal thing that they make. There was like this one ad in the US about like these school supplies, and basically the ad was the kids going normally to school, but then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I have this pen so I can stab someone or something. And I'm like, that's so fucked up, but I'm desensitized to it. And moving forward, I think it's really different, like when it's your own experience versus when you're hearing it, like the experiences from other people. And I think especially like when you have a connection to these people, and I'm not just talking about school shootings, but like when they talk about certain tragic events or things that they think are normal, it's like, what do you mean? And I quite clearly remember like one of my friends who was telling me about how the home right next to his home was bombed, and I'm like, what do you mean? And how he spoke about that was so neutral. It's scary, it's scary, but again, you understand because to some degree you have to cope with it. And coming now to what I'm trying to get to today is, it's one thing again to hear it from your own experience, to normalize that, to hear tragedies from someone else, and now it's an entire thing now to visually see what's going on in the world, and seeing such a like influx of all these tragedies, not that they weren't occurring, but visually seeing, visually hearing, and you can watch live what's going on in the world. And I think as great as media is, not to say that it should not be like shown, but we need to learn how to cope with the fact that we're seeing, again, like I said in the beginning, we're seeing these videos constantly, and it's between like a meme to then literally some country being bombed, and you can see like the satellite like image of it, and everything is just stained red. We need to address the fact that that is something that we're able to see like constantly. And coming to like more of a vivid example on my end, because I want to first of all say very ignorant I was, and I want to say even now, like I am still to a degree very ignorant, and I try my best to not be so ignorant in terms of like educating myself about more what's going on in the world. And I think especially I'm American, I'm very well aware right now of what like my country, I won't even call it my country, but what that country is doing. And I think being outside of the US definitely helps because of different media that you're seeing, but it's just something, it's something. Let's just call it, it's something. And so anyways, what I want to say is that I remember very clearly in October 2023, yes. I remember very clearly that was like the first time that I had really heard about the Palestinian genocide. Which what the fuck, But I remember very clearly seeing that, and I remember having a discussion with my roommates at the time. We were all sitting in my room, and we were talking about it, and there was just this heaviness. There was that heaviness, there was that discomfort in the room, there was anger. There was a lot of emotions, and we were talking about, okay, what can we do, how is this all happening? And we were trying to educate ourselves also further on the matter. And in the end, what we did is we prayed, and because we felt helpless. And after that, we still discussed it in passing, but I think it was good, first of all, that we had that conversation, because even at that point, there was there was so much information coming to us, and at least we didn't leave it like being dormant in our minds, and we were actually able to like sit and talk about it. But I don't think we're even doing that anymore nowadays, or at least not in all spaces, or at least maybe not as much as we should be. And I understand why, but I kind of want to help us to re-engage within mindfully and meaningfully being able to, first of all, get this information, and not just get it from like TikTok or Instagram, but also sitting with the emotions that we feel on the matters at hand, and being able to still engage in our empathy for the people. Because I think if we lose that, I don't know, and I really don't want to know what the answer is if we all lose our empathy, because we cannot bear to continuously open our eyes to the fact that there's so much coming in at all times. And first of all, I want to acknowledge, it is really hard to engage in the current events currently. I think it's always been really hard to engage in current events, because it's like, forget, it's not political, it's all fucking humanitarian. And I think there's a lot of emotions that when you're scrolling and you're seeing this that are going on that you want to avoid. And then also just like engaging in the engaging in the events in general that you want to avoid. And so like from my perspective, I'll be honest, I feel guilt. I feel a lot of guilt, especially when I'm scrolling at night. Like I'll scroll right before I go to bed because I want to unwind, which is maybe not the best thing to be doing anyways. But I'll scroll, and like I was telling you, you'll see it in your algorithm. And if I'm honest, sometimes I don't want to see that. I wanted to look at memes or laugh about something, which again, I have the privilege to do so because I'm geographically lucky. And there's a lot of guilt that comes with that. And on the other hand, there are times where I'm really trying to meaningfully engage, even if it is on TikTok and Instagram, which that's not the best thing to do, I know, because then you don't know where all the sources are coming from. Granted, there are certain feeds that are like, they tell you where their sources are from, and so maybe there's more like credibility on that end. And so I'll get into these issues a bit more specifically. And like in the past, I've gotten into like the Epstein files quite a bit, and then like ICE, what's going on in Sudan, gender-based violence in South Africa, and the topics that, I don't want to say topics because it's not something that's so neutral, but the events that I get into quite oftentimes, I guess where I don't want to say curiosity, but where I dive in the most is into events that if I was there, how would that impact me, or where I already have like a connection to it. And what ends up happening is I'll go through things for like around an hour, and I'll be so angry. And like I feel so helpless. And those emotions, those feelings, those thoughts, I don't think people want to engage with them. And then again, I understand, because when you're also engaging within these, seeing this all visually and like in these emotions, you could also have like an increase in your anxiety or like fear towards the world. It might be overstimulating you because there's so much going wrong. Then it could have gotten to the point where you just become like emotionally numb. And I think that's where a lot of us are actually at. And I think, no one wants to really engage with negativity all the time. And some of us also have the trauma of these events. And so we don't want to be reminded. And there's a lot to it as to why we don't want to engage. And again, like I said, maybe we feel really guilty, and then also we feel helpless because when we do engage, it's like, what can we do? And so I want to coming back to how we can rectify maybe, or like move through this phase, hopefully, of desensitization is through engaging. It is through engaging, and it is making time to engage within these events and within this type of media and within this type of information. Because I think when we're able to actually engage, then not only are we no longer ignorant on certain matters, but we're also not losing our ability to empathize with others. And so what this would look like is potentially like scheduling, when you're able to handle like learning more about certain current events, or maybe you do scroll and you do see some tragic event and you're like, right now I have the capacity and space to actually engage further and learn a bit more. And not just through TikTok and Instagram, but also, use my critical thinking abilities, maybe search out other places, understand where the sources are coming from, what values are like their reporters writing with, because everything has bias. And of course, it is really difficult now, especially in the age of AI, to figure out what is true and what is not, and who is pushing their agenda and who is actually telling the truth. And again, I understand that this is difficult, but I think that because everything is especially visual now, and it's not just about hearing statistics anymore, which there was this time in one of my literature/history classes, they were explaining to us the Holocaust, and it was in 9th grade, and they told us, don't ever focus on the numbers, it's about the people, because numbers, no one has an emotion towards a number sometimes. It is astronomical, but no one has that direct emotion. When you tell someone a story, that is very different. You can connect to a story, especially like when you humanize the people. And now we don't even need stories. We're seeing it all visually. And I think that's especially why it's even more important that we meaningfully engage. And I'm not trying to guilt you right now. Really, this is not about guilt, because I understand. And even as I was writing these episode notes, I was like, this is making me feel really guilty. But it is just to remind you to pay attention, to, again, learn to engage within your empathy, to still, even though you have access to it constantly, about what's going on in the world, to still meaningfully try to learn a bit more. And I think what I've also realized speaking to other people, and I think speaking to people in international contexts, is how different we're taught about history. And, I used to think sometimes, like, why does history matter? Like, why does history matter? Not in like those blatant terms, but sometimes I was like, okay, what's the point of learning all of this? It's because everything has a past and we need to know the past. And I think that's even another reason why is like to generate further understanding of what's currently going on. It is also to dig a bit deeper into, who was actually affiliated with who in the past, where was there already like entanglements, or where was there already threats being made, in order to understand what's going on currently, to give yourself a greater understanding of what's happening right now, which school is not going to teach us. TikTok and Instagram, they might occasionally throw something out there, but it is also still, I believe, one of our responsibilities as global citizens in some sense. But moving on, I know, again, this is a lot of information, or not information, but I know this is maybe a lot, and it feels like it's a large responsibility, and that like it is maybe like all on your shoulders, but obviously maybe we're only one person, and that's not to say that one person doesn't have the ability to motivate, or doesn't have the ability to inspire other people or to make change. No, that's absolutely not what it is, but it's not all on us. But I do think to some degree, if we're able to, we should share some of the responsibility in terms of educating ourselves and moving with the emotions that these events highlight within us. And I know you might be asking, okay, so like, if I experience all these emotions, I experience this anger, if I experience this sadness, what do I do with it? And I think emotions are a really great way to move us to action, and especially anger itself. I think, as the example I gave before, just sitting down and generally having a conversation with people, maybe you'll learn that they know other important information that maybe you didn't know about the situation at hand. And so that's also important to continue to have that discussion. And even if at the end of it, all you feel in that room is that uncomfortable silence, that's something. That's still something, you know. Even also engaging in the media, yes, okay, maybe not mindlessly, but again, when you have the capacity and you actually engage, perhaps that is another way that you can, you know, still use the emotions that you're fueled by and still make some type of progress, or still help other people to see what's going on. Maybe that's like through reposting, or like through putting stuff on your stories. Maybe it's through engaging with organizations, signing petitions, volunteering, going to protests. And I know those are also dangerous at the same time. But I really just don't want to say that we're hopeless. And like I said, I think this is one of our responsibilities. And you know, as I was writing these notes today, I was reminded of this one poem from Martin Niemöller, and he wrote about the Holocaust, and it was, "First they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me." And the reason why I say this poem is because most likely, if you're listening, if you're watching, then potentially you are someone who has geographical luck. And while certain events might not directly be impacting you, besides maybe oil prices and gas prices, then it is still, you are still going to be impacted at the end of the day, because it will come to you. Everything does. And I just want to, I guess I don't want us to forget that. I really don't want us to forget that we are still able to help other people as well. And I know, this is what I want to say before as well, is that I know that you might be thinking that, okay, a repost is not going to do much. But in the instance of the gender-based violence in South Africa, what was happening is, like, it wasn't like considered a like national disaster yet. And so I don't know if many people saw, but I saw a lot on my feed, like this purple movement. And so you saw lots of people either reposting purple, or like their profile pictures were purple screens. And so because of the purple movement, it shifted the political stance. And actually now gender-based violence is considered a national disaster according to the Disaster Management Act in South Africa. And that goes to show you that you can still meaningfully help and meaningfully engage within the media. And even such a small action could actually make a difference. And even if it doesn't make a difference in terms of policies, well, then at least people are curious, or at least interested in why someone screamed purple. I mean, then at least people are not ignorant, or at least being shown that this is happening somewhere. And even that, I mean, like I said, even though we have so much information, we're also a lot of times misinformed, or because we're in certain places, maybe not everything is being shown to us. So maybe we can be change activists in the sense of, yeah, these small acts that actually could lead to something. And yes, I know it's not every single time that this will be the case, but that is still hope. That is still hope. And hopefully that will continue in some sense. And I guess that's my hope. But this has been a lot. And I do want to come to the end of this, because I know if I just continue on, this will be a lot of breaks more in my breathing and how I'm speaking. And it's because I know this is a heavy topic, and I don't want to lose the message through my ramblings. And so, coming to the end, first of all, because I need to take a deep breath, I want all of us to take a deep breath. Remember that even if you're listening right now, this is not all on your shoulders alone. And at the same time, remember that you can make a difference. I still believe that, at least. And I really don't want to lose hope. Let's put it to you like that. I really don't want to lose hope. And I'm hoping through further educating ourselves mindfully, through sitting with the discomfort of these emotions, through making the time, and through also knowing what our capacities are, we are able to become better global citizens. And that's the question I want to ask you guys today is, when was the last time you were an active global participant? Or do you remember that or recall that? If you have the capacity, of course. And before we end today, I kind of want to say a prayer. I'm not the best at this, so I've written one out. And if you're not religious, feel free to end right now. But if you are, or even if you aren't, please stay with me as well. Father God, I want to thank you so much for placing me in the position where I am right now. I want to thank you so much for the person who's on the other end of this screen or the other end of this audio listening. I pray that we're able to redeem ourselves as a world and in your image help other people and process the world, and God willingly strive for greater peace in the future. I pray that you help those in need all around, and that you continue to grant us hope for the future, even if it wavers. God, I pray that you forgive us for our shortcomings and guide us to be resilient individuals who want to continue to improve the world. Thank you, and amen. Thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode. Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Uncomfortable Podcast. Make sure to tune in every Monday for a new episode on Spotify and YouTube, and go ahead and check out our TikTok and our Instagram for more content. Bye!